In the early hours of March 16, 2024, a devastating fire erupted in a single-story home on Willow Creek Drive in Greenville, Mississippi. As flames engulfed the property, witnesses reported thick black smoke rising into the night sky, accompanied by the terrifying sounds of crackling wood and shattering glass. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but by the time they arrived, the house was fully ablaze, with flames reaching over 20 feet into the air. Neighbors stood in shock as they watched the inferno consume everything in its path, their hearts heavy with the fear that lives were being lost within those walls. This tragic event became an unspeakable nightmare when firefighters discovered 8 bodies in the charred remains of the home. Among the deceased were Cassandra Rollins, her 6 children, and Kendrick Rollins' father and brother. The horror didn't end there. Investigations revealed that this was not just a tragic accident but a calculated act of violence that shook the very foundations of the community. As the investigation unfolded, authorities quickly identified Kendrick Rollins as the prime suspect. The shocking twist came when DNA tests revealed a disturbing truth: Kendrick was not the biological father of any of his 6 children. Instead, they were fathered by his father, brother, and even his own son from a previous relationship. This revelation shattered Kendrick's world and set off a chain of events that would culminate in one of the darkest chapters in Mississippi's history. In this video, we invite you to explore the harrowing details of this case. We'll delve into the timeline of events, the psychological turmoil faced by Kendrick Rollins, and the impact on the community. The tragedy of the Rollins family raises profound questions about trust, betrayal, and the lengths to which a person might go when pushed to the brink. Before we dive deeper into this chilling story, we encourage you to engage with us. If you find this content compelling, please take a moment to leave a comment with 777. Your feedback helps us grow and continue sharing these important stories. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more shocking true crime stories. Now, let's unravel the events leading to this horrific night and examine how a seemingly normal family could harbor such dark secrets. In the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood, a sudden and devastating fire broke out in a residential building, shattering the tranquility of the night. It was just past midnight when the first emergency calls flooded into the 911 dispatch center. Panic-stricken voices reported flames engulfing the house, thick smoke billowing into the sky, and the desperate cries of those trapped inside. Firefighters rushed to the scene, sirens wailing, their hearts racing as they prepared to confront the inferno. As the fire blazed, illuminating the darkened streets, the urgency of the situation became apparent. Neighbors gathered outside, their faces etched with fear and confusion as they watched the flames consume the structure. The fire department arrived swiftly, deploying hoses and ladders in a race against time to save anyone who might still be inside. Despite their best efforts, the intense heat and thick smoke made rescue operations perilous. Hours passed, and the relentless flames were finally subdued, leaving behind a charred skeleton of what was once a family home. In the aftermath, firefighters began the grim task of searching through the debris. It was then that they made a heartbreaking discovery: 8 bodies were found among the ruins. The tragedy struck the community hard, as families and friends mourned the loss of loved ones in a situation that had unfolded so rapidly and violently. Investigators quickly got to work, trying to piece together the events leading up to the fire. Questions loomed large: what had caused the blaze? Was it an accident, or was there something more sinister at play? As they delved deeper, the story began to unfold, revealing a web of relationships, secrets, and a community grappling with the shock of such a profound loss. Among the victims was Kendrick Rollins, who had been a resident of the house. His story would soon become central to the investigation, leading authorities to explore his connections to the other victims. As they sifted through the evidence, the narrative took a darker turn. Kendrick was not just a victim, he was also a person of interest in the case, raising unsettling questions about his involvement and the circumstances surrounding the fire. The local community was left reeling. In the days following the tragedy, vigils were held, and discussions about safety and prevention took center stage. Residents grappled with their emotions, seeking answers while trying to comprehend how such a horrific event could occur in their peaceful neighborhood. The impact of the fire extended beyond the immediate loss. It left psychological scars on families, friends, and the entire community. As investigations continued, the media began to cover the story extensively, drawing attention to the plight of the victims and the complexities of their lives. The focus shifted from the fire itself to the individuals affected, sparking conversations about community support, mental health, and the need for resources for those grieving. The narrative was no longer just about a tragic fire, it had evolved into a story of resilience, loss, and the human spirit's capacity to endure. In the months that followed, the community came together to support those impacted by the tragedy. Fundraisers were organized to assist families in need, and mental health services were offered to help residents cope with their grief. Amid the sorrow, there were glimmers of hope as people united, sharing their stories, providing comfort, and fostering a sense of solidarity that would help them heal. The fire incident in Maplewood would be remembered not only for its devastation but also for the strength and compassion displayed by the community in the face of tragedy. It served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of coming together during difficult times. As the investigation progressed, the true story of that fateful night continued to unfold, revealing layers of complexity and emotion that would shape the lives of many for years to come. The aftermath of the devastating fire in Maplewood left a community in shock, grappling with the stark reality of loss. As firefighters worked tirelessly to extinguish the last remnants of the blaze, a sense of dread hung in the air. The structure, once a vibrant family home, now lay in ruins, reduced to smoldering ashes and twisted metal. The sound of crackling debris was a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded just hours before. Once the flames were under control, the grim task of searching through the debris began. Firefighters donned their protective gear, knowing they were entering a scene that would forever stay etched in their memories. Each step through the charred remains felt heavy, the weight of the unknown loomed large. With every piece of rubble they moved, they faced the chilling possibility of discovering human remains, a reality they hoped to avoid. As the search progressed, the somber atmosphere thickened. The firefighters, trained for emergencies but not for this kind of heartbreak, communicated with quiet urgency. They sifted through the wreckage, shifting beams, and debris, their minds focused on the task ahead but their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what they might find. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke, mingling with an overwhelming sense of foreboding. Then, amidst the debris, the unthinkable happened. The first body was discovered. The scene shifted from one of rescue to one of recovery, and the gravity of the situation became painfully clear. As more bodies were uncovered, the full extent of the tragedy began to unfold. 8 individuals were found, their lives extinguished in a matter of moments. Each discovery was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the unexpectedness of fate. The identities of the victims were soon confirmed, and the news sent shockwaves through the community. Families learned that their loved ones were among those who perished, and the outpouring of grief was immediate and profound. Friends and neighbors gathered, sharing memories and supporting one another as they processed the heartbreaking reality. In the days that followed, A somber cloud hung over Maplewood, as the community mourned the lives lost in a fire that had turned from a tragic accident into a devastating loss. Investigators began to piece together the victims' stories, seeking to understand who they were beyond the tragic headlines. They were mothers, fathers, children, and friends, each with their own dreams, aspirations, and connections to the community. The narrative of the fire became intertwined with the lives of those who had perished, transforming them from mere statistics into cherished individuals whose absence would be deeply felt. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted from the immediate horror of the fire to the aftermath of grief and the need for answers. Families sought closure, while the community rallied to support them. Candlelight vigils were organized, drawing people together in remembrance of those who had been lost. The flickering flames of the candles served as a symbol of hope and resilience, illuminating the darkness that had descended upon the neighborhood. In the midst of such sorrow, the community also began to reflect on the importance of safety and prevention. Conversations emerged about fire safety measures, emergency preparedness, and the need for support systems within the community. The tragedy had created a sense of urgency to ensure that no one else would have to endure such loss. As time passed, the memories of the victims remained vivid in the hearts of those who knew them. Stories were shared, laughter mingled with tears, and the legacies of the 8 lost souls became woven into the fabric of Maplewood. The community vowed to honor their memory by coming together, supporting one another, and fostering a sense of unity that would help them heal. The discovery of the bodies was not merely a tragic chapter in the story of a fire, it became a catalyst for change, prompting discussions about community resilience, the value of life, and the importance of cherishing every moment. The echoes of that fateful night would resonate for years to come, reminding everyone that even in the face of unimaginable loss, the spirit of community could shine through the darkest of times. As the smoke cleared and the reality of the tragedy began to sink in, investigators arrived at the scene, equipped with the daunting task of unraveling the circumstances surrounding the fire. The devastation was palpable, and the loss felt by the community was profound. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there remained a pressing need for answers. What had caused the fire? Was it an accident, or was there something more sinister at play? The investigation commenced with a thorough examination of the debris and charred remains of the house. Fire marshals, detectives, and forensic experts meticulously combed through the wreckage, looking for clues that might shed light on the cause of the blaze. They collected samples and documented the scene, their minds racing with questions that needed answers. The urgency of their work was underscored by the knowledge that lives had been lost. The truth was not just a matter of procedure, but a quest for justice for the victims and their families. As investigators delved deeper, they began to piece together the lives of the individuals who had perished in the fire. Among them was Kendrick Rollins, a resident of the house who would soon become a person of interest in the investigation. Kendrick had a complex history, marked by both personal struggles and connections to the other victims. As investigators learned more about him, they uncovered a tangled web of relationships that raised eyebrows and prompted further inquiry. Witnesses were interviewed, and detectives sought to understand Kendrick's interactions with the victims. Friends and family members were questioned, and their insights painted a picture of a man who was both charismatic and troubled. Kendrick's past was marked by instances of volatility, and as investigators pieced together his behaviors and relationships, red flags began to emerge. Rumors circulated within the community, adding to the intrigue surrounding Kendrick's involvement. Some claimed he had been in conflict with others in the household, while others spoke of his struggles with mental health. The more investigators uncovered, the more questions arose. Was there a motive behind the fire? Was it a desperate act driven by personal demons, or was it a tragic accident that spiraled out of control? As the investigation progressed, forensic evidence began to play a crucial role. Fire experts analyzed the patterns of the blaze, searching for signs of arson or negligence. They studied the burn patterns and the materials involved, hoping to uncover the origin of the fire. Each piece of evidence was critical, and the investigators worked tirelessly to ensure that no detail was overlooked. The community watched with bated breath as the investigation unfolded. Vigilant and hopeful, they sought justice for the victims while grappling with their own grief. The local news covered the developments, and as details emerged, the story captivated the public's attention. The narrative shifted from one of tragedy to one of intrigue, drawing in those far beyond the immediate vicinity of the fire. As Kendrick Rollins became the focal point of the investigation, his life came under scrutiny. Detectives sought to interview him, hoping to gain insight into his perspective on that fateful night. Kendrick's reaction to the tragedy was complex. He expressed sorrow for the loss but also exhibited signs of agitation and defensiveness. His behavior raised further questions, leading investigators to wonder whether he was merely a victim or played a more active role in the events that transpired. The investigation took a pivotal turn when DNA results came back, revealing that Kendrick was not the biological father of 6 children found among the victims. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the case, complicating the narrative surrounding his involvement. The implications of this finding were profound, leaving investigators to ponder the dynamics at play within the household and the relationships that existed. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation continued to unfold. The community remained engaged, hoping for resolution while grappling with the emotional fallout of the tragedy. Each new piece of evidence brought with it a mix of hope and despair, as the quest for answers became a shared journey for those impacted by the fire. Ultimately, the investigation into the fire and its aftermath was not just about determining guilt or innocence, it was about understanding the lives that were intertwined in this tragic story. As the investigators worked diligently to uncover the truth, the community stood united, seeking closure and healing in the face of unimaginable loss. The memories of those who perished remained a constant reminder of the fragility of life, and the pursuit of justice became a testament to their enduring legacy. In the wake of the tragic fire that claimed 8 lives, Kendrick Rollins found himself at the center of a maelstrom of emotions and scrutiny. As the days unfolded following the disaster, his reaction became a focal point for investigators, the media, and the grieving community. Initially, Kendrick expressed sorrow for the loss of life, but beneath this veneer of grief lay a complex web of anger, defensiveness, and unresolved issues. In the immediate aftermath of the fire, Kendrick was seen as a man in shock. News reports captured his initial statements, where he lamented the tragic loss of friends and family. He spoke of the love he had for those who perished, recounting memories and emphasizing the deep bonds they shared. However, as the investigation progressed, unsettling signs began to surface that painted a different picture. Kendrick's demeanor shifted dramatically as he became increasingly aware of the growing suspicion surrounding him. The initial sympathy he received quickly transformed into scrutiny as investigators focused on his past and his relationships with the victims. His defensiveness began to manifest in confrontational behaviors, leading to heated exchanges with those who questioned him. Friends and family members noted a marked change in his personality. The grief-stricken individual they once knew appeared to be overshadowed by a volatile anger. Witnesses reported incidents where Kendrick lashed out verbally, expressing frustration over the media's portrayal of him and the community's suspicions. He felt trapped in a narrative that painted him as a suspect, despite his insistence that he had nothing to do with the fire. This defensive posture only fueled the speculation surrounding his involvement, leading many to wonder if there was more to the story than he was letting on. As investigators sought to interview Kendrick about the events leading up to that fateful night, his responses became increasingly erratic. He oscillated between expressing remorse for the loss of life and deflecting blame onto others. This unpredictable behavior raised eyebrows among investigators, who began to question his reliability as a witness. Kendrick's emotional roller coaster left many puzzled. Was he genuinely grieving, or was he concealing something deeper? Rumors began to swirl within the community, amplifying the tension surrounding Kendrick. Some claimed that his anger stemmed from feelings of guilt, while others speculated that he feared the consequences of his actions. The psychological toll of the tragedy weighed heavily on him, manifesting in sleepless nights and moments of deep introspection. Kendrick often found himself isolated, grappling with a flood of emotions that he struggled to articulate. As the investigation continued, Kendrick's reaction became more pronounced. He began to engage in erratic behavior, including confrontations with the media and even public outbursts during community meetings. Many saw these actions as desperate cries for help, while others viewed them as attempts to deflect attention away from his potential involvement in the fire. The community, already shaken by grief, found itself grappling with conflicting emotions, wanting to empathize with Kendrick's pain while also questioning his role in the unfolding tragedy. Kendrick's relationships with friends and family became strained as suspicions mounted. Those who once stood by him began to distance themselves, caught between their loyalty to Kendrick and the mounting evidence that suggested he might not be entirely innocent. This isolation only deepened his anger and frustration, creating a vicious cycle that further alienated him from those who could offer support. In the midst of the turmoil, Kendrick sought solace in various ways. Some reported that he turned to substance use as a means of coping with the overwhelming grief and anxiety that consumed him. This descent into unhealthy habits only exacerbated the situation, leading to further erratic behavior and a growing perception of him as a troubled figure. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Kendrick occasionally attempted to reclaim his narrative. He would share moments of vulnerability, expressing his longing for understanding and compassion. Yet, these glimpses of sincerity were often overshadowed by his outbursts and confrontational demeanor, leaving the community divided on how to respond to him. As the investigation moved forward, Kendrick Rollins became emblematic of the broader struggle between grief and suspicion. His reaction to the tragedy was not merely a personal journey but a reflection of the community's own grappling with loss and the search for answers. In many ways, Kendrick's emotional turmoil mirrored the collective pain felt by those left behind, creating a complex narrative that intertwined individual sorrow with communal grief. Ultimately, Kendrick Rollins' reaction to the fire and its aftermath serves as a reminder of the profound impact of tragedy on the human psyche. His struggle to navigate his emotions in the wake of such loss is a testament to the challenges faced by individuals grappling with grief, guilt, and the quest for redemption. As the investigation continued, the question lingered: would Kendrick find a way to reconcile his past and seek healing, or would he remain ensnared in a cycle of anger and despair? As the investigation into the tragic fire in Maplewood unfolded, significant developments began to emerge, shaping the narrative and offering new insights into the events surrounding the incident. Each new piece of information added layers of complexity to an already intricate case, prompting ongoing discussions among investigators, the media, and the grieving community. Initially, the focus was on establishing the cause of the fire. Forensic teams meticulously analyzed the scene, collecting evidence, and examining potential sources of ignition. As they delved deeper into the investigation, they discovered that the fire had started in the living room, where a faulty electrical outlet appeared to be the likely culprit. This finding brought a glimmer of relief to the community, as it suggested that the fire may have been accidental rather than intentional. However, the investigation was far from over, and many questions remained unanswered. As investigators continued their work, they began to uncover more about the dynamics within the household. Interviews with neighbors and friends revealed a complex web of relationships among the victims and Kendrick Rollins. It became clear that tensions had existed in the household prior to the fire, with reports of conflicts and disagreements surfacing. This prompted investigators to explore the possibility that interpersonal issues may have played a role in the events leading up to the tragedy. Kendrick's behavior also drew increasing attention from law enforcement. As a person of interest, he became the subject of deeper scrutiny. Detectives sought to gather more information about his whereabouts on the night of the fire, as well as his interactions with the other victims. Witness accounts painted a varied picture of Kendrick, with some describing him as a caring individual while others expressed concerns about his volatility. This duality added further complexity to the investigation, leaving investigators grappling with conflicting narratives. In the weeks following the fire, the community rallied around the victims' families, organizing memorial services and vigils to honor their memory. These events provided a platform for collective mourning and healing, but they also served to heighten the scrutiny on Kendrick. As he attended these gatherings, members of the community observed his demeanor closely, searching for signs of guilt or remorse. The pressure mounted as public interest in the case grew, with media outlets covering every twist and turn of the investigation. The turning point in the case came when forensic evidence indicated that the fire had been exacerbated by the presence of flammable materials in the living room. This revelation shifted the narrative once again, leading investigators to consider whether negligence or recklessness might have contributed to the tragedy. They began to question whether Kendrick had been aware of the potential fire hazards in the home, further complicating the case against him. As the investigation progressed, Kendrick's emotional state became a focal point of discussion. Witnesses reported increasingly erratic behavior, and concerns about his mental health began to surface. Investigators explored the idea that his psychological struggles may have influenced his actions leading up to the fire. This revelation opened up new avenues of inquiry, prompting discussions about the impact of mental health on decision-making and personal responsibility. Simultaneously, the community struggled to reconcile their feelings toward Kendrick. Many were torn between sympathy for his loss and suspicion about his involvement in the tragedy. The conversations surrounding mental health added an additional layer of complexity, as residents grappled with the stigma often associated with such issues. This dialogue became a significant aspect of the community's healing process, as they sought to understand the broader implications of the fire and its aftermath. As the investigation neared its conclusion, authorities prepared to present their findings to the public. The decision loomed over the community: would Kendrick face charges for his alleged role in the fire, or would the evidence point toward a tragic accident? The anticipation was palpable, and the stakes were high as residents awaited clarity on an event that had profoundly impacted their lives. In the final stages of the investigation, authorities released a report detailing their findings. The evidence indicated that while the fire had started accidentally, Kendrick's actions in the moments leading up to the blaze raised questions about his responsibility. The report highlighted a series of decisions that could be interpreted as negligence, as well as the presence of unresolved tensions within the household. The community was left to grapple with the implications of the report. Many felt a sense of closure, while others struggled to come to terms with the complexities of the case. The story of the fire had evolved from a simple tragedy into a multifaceted exploration of human relationships, mental health, and the consequences of our actions. In the end, the developments in the case served as a powerful reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of addressing mental health issues within the community. The tragedy of the fire resonated deeply, prompting conversations about prevention, support, and the need for compassion in the face of adversity. As the community continued to heal, the lessons learned from the investigation would undoubtedly shape their future, fostering resilience and understanding in the wake of unimaginable loss. As the investigation into the devastating fire in Maplewood progressed, the legal ramifications began to take shape, casting a long shadow over the community. The tragic loss of 8 lives had not only left a void in the hearts of friends and family but had also opened a complex legal discourse that would reverberate throughout the area for months to come. With the findings of the investigation indicating that the fire was likely caused by a combination of faulty electrical wiring and the presence of flammable materials, the legal landscape became increasingly intricate. Authorities faced the challenging task of determining individual accountability, particularly regarding Kendrick Rollins, who had emerged as a person of interest. The investigation had uncovered a series of decisions that suggested negligence, and the possibility of criminal charges loomed large. As the community awaited clarity on Kendrick's potential involvement, the legal system began to engage with various aspects of the tragedy. On one hand, there was the question of whether Kendrick's actions or lack thereof could be construed as criminal negligence. Legal experts weighed in on the implications of his behavior leading up to the fire, evaluating whether his understanding of the risks associated with the household conditions met the threshold for culpability. The debate surrounding Kendrick's potential charges was further complicated by his mental health struggles, which had come to light during the investigation. Advocates for mental health awareness argued that his psychological state at the time should be taken into account when assessing his actions. They emphasized the need for compassion over punishment, proposing that understanding his mental health challenges could provide critical context for his decisions. This perspective sparked conversations within the community about the intersection of mental health and legal accountability, highlighting the complexities that arise when personal struggles meet tragic outcomes. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the focus also shifted to the families of the victims. Many sought civil remedies, contemplating lawsuits against Kendrick for wrongful death. The emotional toll of the tragedy had left families grappling with loss and grief, and the prospect of legal action offered a potential avenue for justice, albeit a painful one. Legal representatives for the families began to gather evidence, aiming to establish a clear link between Kendrick's actions and the tragic outcomes of the fire. In the weeks that followed, the narrative evolved. Public sentiment became increasingly vocal, with community members expressing their views on the legal consequences facing Kendrick. Some advocated for leniency, arguing that he had already suffered immeasurable loss and that punishing him further would not bring back the lives lost. Others, however, felt that accountability was necessary to ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. This division within the community underscored the emotional complexity of the situation, as individuals grappled with their own grief while navigating the legal discourse surrounding the incident. As legal proceedings began to take shape, Kendrick's defense team emerged, prepared to argue against any charges brought against him. Their strategy centered on establishing that while the fire was indeed tragic, it was ultimately an accident and unforeseeable event that Kendrick could not have prevented. They aimed to highlight the absence of malicious intent, framing Kendrick as a victim of circumstance rather than a perpetrator of negligence. This defense posed a significant challenge for the prosecution, which had to contend with the emotional weight of the case while also navigating the legal nuances of proving culpability. As the trial date approached, the emotional stakes were high. Families of the victims prepared to testify, sharing their stories and the profound impact the loss had on their lives. The courtroom became a stage for emotional catharsis, as the narratives of love, loss, and tragedy intertwined. The community watched closely, remaining engaged in the proceedings as they sought a resolution to a case that had deeply affected them all. In the end, the legal consequences of the fire would not only shape Kendrick's future but would also serve as a reflection of the community's values and priorities. The case became a pivotal moment for discussions surrounding accountability, mental health, and the importance of safety measures. As the trial unfolded, the community prepared to grapple with the legal outcomes, knowing that the reverberations of this tragedy would linger long after the courtroom doors closed. Ultimately, the legal proceedings surrounding the fire in Maplewood became more than a quest for justice. They evolved into a broader conversation about the nature of accountability and compassion in the face of unimaginable loss. The community, still healing from the tragedy, found themselves at a crossroads, forced to confront difficult questions about responsibility, forgiveness, and the enduring impact of grief. As they navigated the complexities of the legal system, the hope remained that lessons learned from this heartbreaking incident would resonate far beyond the courtroom, fostering a deeper understanding of the human experience in times of crisis. In the wake of the devastating fire that claimed the lives of 8 individuals in Maplewood, a deeper psychological analysis emerged, seeking to understand the intricate web of emotions, motivations, and behaviors that surrounded the tragedy. As investigators probed the circumstances leading to the fire, the psychological dimensions of the key individuals involved became increasingly significant, particularly in the case of Kendrick Rollins, who found himself at the center of scrutiny. Kendrick's emotional state in the aftermath of the fire was complex and multifaceted. Initially perceived as a grieving individual, his reactions soon revealed layers of anger, guilt, and confusion. Those who knew him observed a profound shift in his demeanor. Friends described him as someone who had always been warm and charismatic, but the tragedy seemed to fracture his personality. The grief he experienced was compounded by the weight of suspicion that now rested on his shoulders, creating a psychological burden that became increasingly difficult to bear. The interplay between grief and guilt is a common theme in traumatic experiences, and in Kendrick's case, it manifested in various ways. As he navigated the loss of friends and family, he was also confronted with the lingering question of whether he could have prevented the fire. This internal conflict spiraled into anxiety and depression, leading him to engage in self-destructive behaviors. The psychological toll of the tragedy began to take root, prompting a spiral of emotional turmoil that left him feeling isolated and misunderstood. Kendrick's defensiveness in the face of inquiries about his involvement further complicated his psychological profile. As investigators delved into his past and the relationships he had with the victims, his reaction to their probing became increasingly erratic. This defensiveness can be understood through the lens of psychological projection, where individuals project their insecurities and fears onto others. Kendrick may have felt cornered, leading him to lash out in ways that alienated those who sought to support him. The community's reaction to Kendrick added another layer of psychological complexity. As residents grappled with their own grief, they were also faced with the need to make sense of Kendrick's behavior. The conflicting emotions of sympathy and suspicion created a charged atmosphere, further complicating Kendrick's ability to process his own feelings. The stigma surrounding mental health issues often exacerbates such situations, as individuals like Kendrick may feel reluctant to seek help or express vulnerability in a community that is quick to judge. Moreover, the concept of survivor's guilt became a poignant element of Kendrick's psychological landscape. This phenomenon occurs when an individual feels guilt for having survived a traumatic event while others did not. Kendrick's struggle with this guilt may have been intensified by the fact that he had lived in the home that was lost to the fire, leading to a profound sense of responsibility for the tragedy. The weight of this guilt is often heavy, manifesting in feelings of worthlessness and despair, and can hinder the healing process. As the investigation progressed, mental health professionals began to weigh in on the broader implications of the tragedy. They emphasized the importance of addressing mental health within the community, particularly in the wake of traumatic events. The fire had not only claimed lives but had also left deep psychological scars on those who survived, including Kendrick. The need for accessible mental health resources became a focal point for discussions about community resilience and recovery. Therapeutic interventions were proposed as a means to support not only Kendrick but also the families of the victims and the wider community. Grief counseling, support groups, and mental health services could provide critical outlets for individuals to process their emotions, share their experiences, and find solace in the shared journey of healing. The tragedy served as a catalyst for a broader conversation about mental health awareness, stigma reduction, and the importance of fostering a supportive environment for those affected by trauma. In the end, the psychological analysis of Kendrick Rollins and the community's reaction to the fire revealed the profound impact of tragedy on the human psyche. The interplay of grief, guilt, and societal expectations created a complex emotional landscape that required careful navigation. As the community sought to heal, the lessons learned from this tragedy underscored the importance of understanding the psychological dimensions of loss and the need for compassion in the face of adversity. Kendrick's story became emblematic of the struggles faced by many in the aftermath of trauma. His journey through grief, guilt, and isolation resonated with those who had experienced similar losses, sparking important conversations about mental health and the importance of seeking help. The tragedy in Maplewood, while heart-wrenching, ultimately became a catalyst for change, prompting the community to reflect on their collective resilience and the need for compassionate support systems in times of crisis. In the aftermath of the devastating fire in Maplewood, the community's reactions unfolded in a complex tapestry of grief, anger, confusion, and solidarity. As news of the tragedy spread, residents found themselves grappling with the profound loss of 8 lives, each of whom was deeply woven into the fabric of their neighborhood. The incident sparked a wave of emotional responses that highlighted both the strength and vulnerabilities of the community. Initially, there was a palpable sense of shock. For many, the fire represented an unimaginable tragedy that shattered their sense of safety and normalcy. In the days following the event, neighbors gathered in small groups, sharing memories of the victims and offering support to one another. This collective mourning became a vital outlet for expressing grief and processing the overwhelming emotions that accompanied such a loss. Vigils were organized, drawing together hundreds of residents who lit candles in memory of those who had perished, illuminating the night in a poignant display of solidarity. As the investigation progressed, community members began to direct their grief toward Kendrick Rollins, the individual who had become a focal point of suspicion. Mixed emotions surfaced as residents wrestled with their feelings about him. Some expressed sympathy, recognizing that Kendrick had also suffered a devastating loss and was grappling with his own grief. Others, however, felt anger and betrayal, questioning how someone who had lived in the home could have allowed such a tragedy to unfold. This division created a charged atmosphere, with debates erupting in local forums and social media platforms about his potential culpability. The media coverage of the fire further complicated community reactions. As details emerged about Kendrick's past and the nature of the relationships within the household, sensationalized narratives often overshadowed the human aspect of the tragedy. Headlines focused on the drama surrounding Kendrick, drawing attention away from the victims and their families. Many residents voiced their frustration with the media's portrayal, urging a focus on honoring the lives lost rather than sensationalizing the story. This push for respectful remembrance became a rallying cry for the community, highlighting their desire to ensure that the victims were not forgotten amidst the chaos. In response to the tragedy, local organizations began mobilizing to provide support and resources for those affected. Fundraisers were organized to assist the families of the victims, and mental health professionals offered counseling services to help community members process their grief. This outpouring of support illustrated the resilience of the community, demonstrating their capacity to come together in the face of adversity. The tragedy became a catalyst for increased awareness around mental health issues, prompting discussions about the importance of emotional well-being and the need for accessible resources. As the investigation progressed and legal proceedings began, the community remained engaged, eager for updates and resolution. Town hall meetings were held to discuss the ongoing investigation and the implications for safety measures in the neighborhood. Residents voiced their concerns about fire safety regulations and the need for improved emergency preparedness. These discussions reflected a collective determination to prevent such a tragedy from occurring again, showcasing the community's commitment to learning from the past and fostering a safer environment for all. The psychological impact of the fire extended beyond the immediate families of the victims, affecting the entire community. As residents processed their grief, many reported experiencing heightened anxiety and fear regarding their own safety. This collective trauma prompted some to seek therapy and support groups, recognizing the importance of addressing their emotional well-being. Conversations about mental health became more prominent, breaking down the stigma that often surrounded such discussions. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the need for compassion and understanding, both for those directly affected and for the broader community grappling with loss. As time passed, the community continued to navigate the complexities of grief and healing. Annual memorials were established to honor the victims, ensuring that their memories would live on within the hearts of those who knew them. These gatherings evolved into opportunities for storytelling, where friends and family members shared their favorite memories, celebrating the lives lost while also fostering a sense of connection among attendees. Ultimately, the fire in Maplewood served as a pivotal moment for the community, prompting a profound reflection on the values of compassion, resilience, and solidarity. The reactions of the residents highlighted the intricate interplay between grief, anger, and healing. As they navigated their emotional landscapes, the community found strength in unity, demonstrating that even in the face of unimaginable loss, they could rise together, supporting one another through the darkest of times. In the end, the legacy of the tragedy extended beyond the immediate aftermath, shaping the community's identity and fostering a renewed commitment to safety, mental health awareness, and empathetic support. The fire became not just a moment of sorrow, but a turning point for Maplewood, one that would resonate for years to come as residents continued to honor the memories of those they lost while forging a path toward healing and hope. In the wake of the tragic fire that swept through a Maplewood home, claiming the lives of 8 individuals, the community and those affected found themselves navigating a complex landscape of grief, loss, and reflection. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the implications of this disaster would extend far beyond the immediate aftermath. prompting a deep examination of personal and collective responsibilities, mental health, and community resilience. The initial shock of the tragedy reverberated throughout the neighborhood, bringing together residents in a shared experience of mourning. Vigils and memorials served as poignant reminders of the lives lost, while also highlighting the strong bonds that tied the community together. In the days and weeks that followed, as the investigation began to unfold, the emotional responses became more nuanced, revealing the intricate layers of human emotion that accompany such devastating events. Kendrick Rollins, the individual at the center of the investigation, became a focal point for both sympathy and suspicion. His journey through grief, guilt, and the scrutiny of his actions illustrated the complexities of human behavior in times of crisis. Many grappled with their feelings toward him as a figure of suspicion and as a fellow victim of loss. This duality underscored the challenges of navigating relationships in the aftermath of tragedy, where emotions can shift rapidly and perceptions can be clouded by grief. The community's reactions also prompted important conversations about mental health. The psychological impact of the fire extended beyond the immediate families of the victims, affecting the emotional well-being of the entire neighborhood. As residents began to seek support and resources, discussions surrounding mental health gained prominence, breaking down the stigma often associated with these issues. The tragedy served as a catalyst for change, prompting a renewed commitment to understanding and addressing mental health within the community. Legal consequences loomed large as authorities worked to determine accountability. The potential charges against Kendrick raised significant questions about negligence and personal responsibility. The interplay of law and ethics became a focal point for discussions within the community, highlighting the complexities that arise when personal struggles intersect with tragic outcomes. The legal proceedings promised to be both a quest for justice and a reflection of the community's values and priorities. As time passed, the Maplewood community demonstrated remarkable resilience. They rallied around the families of the victims, organizing fundraisers and support initiatives that emphasized their collective strength. This outpouring of support not only honored the memories of those lost but also reinforced the bonds among residents, reminding them that they were not alone in their grief. The community's commitment to healing and remembrance became a powerful testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise in the face of adversity. The legacy of the fire ultimately extended beyond the immediate loss, shaping the identity of the Maplewood community. The tragedy became a pivotal moment for reflection, prompting conversations about fire safety, emergency preparedness, and the importance of mental health awareness. Residents became more engaged in advocating for safety measures, ensuring that lessons learned from the fire would lead to positive changes in their environment. In conclusion, the tragic fire in Maplewood served as a profound reminder of the fragility of life and the interconnectedness of human experiences. As the community navigated the aftermath, they encountered a complex web of emotions and challenges that required compassion, understanding, and collaboration. The journey through grief is rarely linear, it is a path filled with ups and downs, marked by moments of despair and glimmers of hope. The collective experience of loss and healing has the potential to foster a deeper sense of community, encouraging residents to support one another in ways they may not have previously considered. As they continue to honor the memories of those lost, the community of Maplewood stands as a testament to resilience, reminding us all of the importance of empathy, connection, and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. The lessons learned from this heartbreaking event will resonate for years to come, guiding the community toward a future that embraces both remembrance and renewal.